I'm a fucking artist. I'm sensitive as shit.
You know, I like Ace of Spades, but like, every Motörhead album just sounds exactly the same. No, Chuckles the Wonder Cunt, the half-wit opinion you just haplessly regurgitated from Pitchfork.com and Rolling Stone magazine sounds exactly the same. Lemmy has more versatility in that jawbreaker-sized facial mole than you have in your body and the bodies of anyone at all in your immediate vicinity. Every Motörhead album doesn't sound the same. Lemmy's voice sounds the same, and you continually mistaking that for musical similarity? Yeah, that's called a shallow observation. Pepper in a few lazy punchlines and take that act on the road, and you could conceivably recreate the stand-up success of Dane Cook. Of course his voice sounds the fucking same. In colloquial parlance, that's called fucking consistency. Not, of course, to be confused with self-quotation. Because in a musical sense, from speed metal to blues metal to experiment with prog metal to thrash metal to old-time rock and roll to punk
God save the Queen. They made you.
to downright fucking blues
The only thing that's missing is a little mouth harp blues. That's how we do it. And you know.
Over the course of their damn near 4-decade career, in pure mathematical terms, Motörhead have embraced and excelled at more subgenres of rock, blues, and metal than Iron fucking Maiden, patron saint of pimple-faced prog nerds that fallaciously claim Motörhead is a one-note pony. Fuck them and fuck you! Bring on the first record!
You know, when I started Motörhead, I thought, well, nobody's going to want to hear this, but I want to do it anyway, you know. And now, 16 years later, I'm still doing it. Same horrible fucking band, you know. And people are still queuing up to see it, so it's all right.
The debut album So Nice, they recorded it twice. As was previously mentioned in the very first metal mythos devoted to Judas Priest, very few bands hit the bullseye their first time out, and Motörhead, sadly, are no exception. Not that the band's self-titled debut is bad, it's just that if you come into this record expecting the band that married punk and metal and inadvertently created the speed and thrash metal subgenres in the process, well, you're in for a fuck of a lot of punk and flat zero metal. The best way to objectively assess the quality of the eponymous Motörhead release is to judge it not as the first Motörhead record, but as a transitional album from Lemmy's previous band. For those who aren't apprised, Lemmy Kilmister first broke it big by filing into the ranks of the space rock pioneers by the name of Hawkwind, beginning as a simple bassist and eventually emerging as one of the chief songwriters of the band and one of its most domineering creative forces. In short, whether he knew it or not at the time, Lemmy simply outgrew Hawkwind, which combined with Lemmy's fully engorged methamphetamine addiction ultimately led to his dismissal from the band and Hawkwind's dismissal from fucking relevance. After a couple false starts with other members, Lemmy recruited drummer cum speed freak Phil Filthy Animal Taylor.
When he gave me a ride down to Rockfield, right, we got in the house and we slept, and then we got up, oh, we didn't sleep, we got up off the floor and we went outside, right, and he started naked, went outside and he said, it's all right, I'm on drugs. All these houses around, you know, like, you can imagine the curtains going, you know.
Who, while constructing a houseboat for food, and perhaps more likely amphetamines and alimony, learned that the foreman was a guitarist, who turned out to be a fretboard fanatic by the name of Fast Eddie Clark.
I was in bed, and the door goes, and I go to open the door, and it was quite early. And I've opened the door, and there's Lemmy standing there with a leather jacket and a bullet belt. And he handed them to me, he said, you got the job, and then walked off.
and thus the classic Motorhead trinity was assembled at last. Don't consider this a punkier incarnation of Motorhead, think of it rather as an extremely heavy Hawkwind. On those terms, fuck if this doesn't slay. It's got the raw punk rock snarl of the late 70s, but more than a thimbleful of the acid rock spaciness of Hawkwind, as personified by the album's standout, in my opinion, White Line Fever, which I'm 100% certain is about driving. So the crack house. Look, the point is that you have to temper your expectations when going into the first Motorhead record. It's no Ace of Spades or even Orgasmatron, but when I'm in the mood for some punk rock, 70s wall of noise histrionics, fuck if this isn't the very first album I reach for every time. Punk fans, this is the Motorhead album you're looking for. And so kicks off the holy triumvirate of classic Motorhead. For most bands, the ascent from anonymity to dominance is a gradual process, taking place over the course of numerous releases until at last settling into a groove that rendered what is generally considered to be their classic output. But not fucking Motorhead, because by their second record, thanks to a timely partnership with legendary Rolling Stones producer Jimmy Miller, and their own ceaseless exbursts of creativity, they had already crafted arguably the most towering masterpiece of their career and heavy metal at large. Its name? Motherfucking Overkill. Simultaneously a breakneck barrage of badass, and one of the most soulful bluesy efforts of the band's career. One can tell listening to Overkill that every note you hear on the record is perfectly representative of what Lemmy, Fast Eddie Clarke, and Filthy Animal Taylor were feeling, or more accurately, not feeling, at that precise moment in time. It's a snapshot of the evolution of the nascent heavy metal genre as a whole, and in my opinion, a strong contender for the single best album in Motorhead's discography. But as much as we all love to peer hypnotically at Lemmy's mutton chops and that giant fucking Cocoa Puff on the side of his face taking center stage on Overkill, is Motorhead's equally pioneering, perpetually pissed percussionist, Filthy Animal. The drummer Lemmy hired because of all reasons, he gave him a ride to practice one day.
I took him with me in his car with no windshield. So I pulled this bird with a huge fur coat and she sat in my lap all the way. It was great.
Oh, lies.
And the fucking drive shaft dropped out of his car about 3/4 of the way there.
On the way back?
No, on the way there as well. Then you got it repaired, then it fell out again on the way back.
Anyway, there was a windshield in it.
No, there wasn't.
The heater wasn't working.
There was no windshield in it, you cunt.
Every modern death metal / metalcore / thrash band that employs the buzzsaw double kick bass drum technique, by rights should be cutting fucking royalty checks to that man.
I always wanted to play two bass drums, but I always said to myself, no, I'm not gonna be one of these wankers who goes on stage, you know, and has 2 bass drums and never even fucking plays them. Not until I play them. So I got this other bass drum, and I used to get to rehearsals a couple of hours before the other guys and just practice, you know, just sit there going, basically like running or something like that. And that's how that's how the song Overkill came. I was actually doing that, playing that riff, you know, just trying to get my coordination right. When Eddie and Lenny like walked in, I was just about to stop and they went, no, don't stop, keep going, keep going.
I mean, it's no impossibly overproduced, programmed, clicky Pro Tools horseshit Cannibal Corpse double bass. For an album from '79, this is fucking monstrous.
I was down at the record store in Copenhagen, the local record store, and he put on Motorhead, and Phil Taylor's double bass drums just fucking tore my head right off.
But as ardent a pioneer as Overkill was to the budding speed and thrash metal movements of the early 80s, the record is just as firm in its footing when it comes time for balls-out blues metal, like my personal favorite song of the album, and one of my absolute favorite Motorhead tracks, period, the anthemic album closer, Limb from Limb. Overkill. Overkill, a blues metal magnum opus. Listen to this record or default on your penis license.
Because we shoot to kill, and you know we always will. It's a bomber, it's a bomber.
Under fucking rated. The middle child of the aforementioned Trinity, and a mind-blowing classic released in its own right. If Bomber had been released by any other band between any other two albums than Overkill and Ace of fucking Spades, it would have been the cornerstone of their entire career. Yet simply between a rushed recording, an abbreviated tour, and lack of promotional music videos during the gestative years of what would eventually become MTV, Bomber ranks as one of the single most frequently overlooked records in all of metal. For fucking shame. If it suffers from one legitimate malady, it's a wonky as fuck sequencing. What the fuck is Bomber, one of your absolute best tracks and a song you name this fucking record after, doing not first, not last, not even fucking third, but second from goddamn last on this album? What kind of Chinese brown heroin was the record company slamming into their dope-feeding veins at the time? Best track, one that's similarly buried in the album's midpoint, the blistering Poison, the first of many of Lemmy Kilmeister's odes to shitty ex-girlfriends.
I take my poison, poison. I guess I poisoned my life. I wish I was poison, poison. I wish I'd poisoned my wife, oh.
This album isn't a valley between two peaks, it's a plateau connecting the blinding brilliance of Overkill to the universe-shattering badassery of the breakthrough that was to come.
You've adopted the Ace of Spades as your motif. Why the Ace of Spades?
Because it's bad luck. Ace of Spades is bad luck, isn't it? See? So we figured if we use bad luck as our theme, then it can't get any worse. Come on, for fuck's sake, how long can it take? Ace of Spades!
Well, you've heard the hype from far more prominent and less attractive rock critics, but for the purposes of public record, permit me to voice in the following. Holy fuck, what an album! All killer, no filler, blistering, gritty, spaghetti western speed metal of the 7th degree. I get that the album is praised to the moon and back, but you know what, folks? Sometimes the hype is there for a fucking reason. Top 3 greatest metal albums and top 5 greatest rock albums fucking ever. From the opening chords of the title track Suicide Speed Metal until the final shells of the album closer The Hammer at Last Detonate, this album has one mission and one mission alone: to fucking destroy. For me, the best moments, however, manifest in more down-paced numbers like the indescribably catchy Fast and Loose, the blues-laden groove of The Chase is Better Than The Catch, and my personal favorite standout, Roman Polanski's favorite Motörhead song, Jailbait.
I don't even dare to ask your age. It's enough to know you're here backstage. You're jailbait, and I just can't wait.
Ace of Spades established Motörhead as one of the all-time greatest metal bands in history, and this one record inspired untold thousands of imitators, some better than others. No Ace of Spades, no speed metal, no thrash, and if Venom and Bathory's list of inspirations is to be believed, no black or death metal either. Don't you dare commit the unpardonable sin of just listening to the title track, because Ace of Spades is an unrelenting musical juggernaut. Perfect 10. Fucking buy it. Even the Incredible Hulk has to stumble on occasion. For fuck's sake, Batman beat him with a fucking gas pellet. Yeah, fuck off, DC Comics. As such, the Motörhead monolith at last struck the first roadblock of their career. It's a monument to the enduring quality of their music, however, that 1982's Iron Fist is still an appallingly good album, building on the whirlwind of speed that took shape on the Trinity, and unfortunately frequently degenerating into self-parody. But you have to understand where the band was at this point. Guitarist Fast Eddie Clarke and Lemmy were about 2 arguments away from fucking Pistols at Dawn. To placate the guitarist, who by this point had quit the band on a damn near monthly basis, they let Eddie produce the album. Now, Fast Eddie Clarke is no slouch, not even behind a producer's desk necessarily, just check out his phenomenal output with Fastway in the 80s. But it's one thing to produce when a band are firing on all cylinders. It's another thing entirely when those cylinders are filled with fucking amphetamines. Eddie did what he could, but the personality and chemical clashes were painfully evident in the final product. By the end, it was reputedly impossible to just even get Lemmy to show up in the studio at all, and so the band went from the titanic heights of the Ace of Spades, following that up with arguably the greatest live album in the history of metal, No Sleep Till Hammersmith, and followed that up with an album that qualitatively lies a few rungs below Bomber. Not god-awful, even occasionally excellent, and it's worth noting that absolutely anything likely would have been perceived as inadequate follow-up to a sonic paradigm shift like Ace of Spades, but come on, Motörhead, you know you can do better than this. Upon achieving bona fide superstar status in the early 80s, Lemmy, who between early tours with punk bands like The Damned and later collaborations with Dave Grohl and the Foo Fighters could never be accurately described as a musical snob, began to use his newfound notoriety to branch out musically. In 1980, shortly after Ace of Spades, he used his burgeoning prominence to give exposure to one of the terminally underrated all-female rock bands, Girl School. But when Lemmy, as frankly a favor to his then-girlfriend Wendy O. Williams, decided to collaborate with the Plasmatics to cover the country western crooner Stand By Your Man, guitarist Fast Eddie Clarke had filled the tank on Lemmy's fellatio-fueled philanthropy and went splitsville. With less than a year to deliver the next album, Filthy Animal Taylor, himself a lifelong fan of prog rock pioneers Thin Lizzy, convinced Lemmy to recruit their former guitar prodigy, Brian Robertson. Now let's get this shit out in the open right the fuck now. Brian Robertson is a pretentious wiener, the kind of guy who refers to his body as his instrument, who knows the best wine to pair with a black turtleneck. If this guy's head were jammed any farther up his own ass, he could use his nipples as a fucking periscope. But the motherfucker can throw down on guitar, and that he did on 83's criminally misunderstood Another Perfect Day, to date Motörhead's only flirtation with full-on fucking prog metal. Oh, hi, metalsucks.net. What's that you were saying about Motörhead releasing the same album over and over again? Oh, what's that you can only answer in muffled gasping noises due to the fact that Triptychon's collective talentless cocks are cramming your fucking duodenum? Yeah, fair enough, we'll move for an extension. Another Perfect Day, for all its proggish posture, is at its best when it's at its bluesiest.
Two-faced women, two-time guys, two-faced women, two black eyes, one-track mind.
Another Perfect Day is what happens when you marry Motörhead's unique blend of ball-bustin' blues metal with the street-level prog rock of Thin Lizzy. An adverse pairing at face value, but somehow they find common ground and produce one of the most musically daring records in the Motörhead catalog. Strongly recommended. Gotta level with you here, folks. I never have and likely never will get Orgasmatron. I think it's maybe down to the fact that I wasn't alive during the events that preceded the release of this album, but for some fairly baffling reason, 1986's Orgasmatron is considered something of a comeback album in metal circles, and listening to the frankly generic final product, I don't think it's a title the album deserves. But here I'm getting ahead of myself. From day one, it seemed Brian Robertson was in way over his afro and fucking Motörhead. From his repeated insistence that he be referred to as a special guest musician, to his refusal to play Motörhead standards like Ace of Spades in a live setting, to his tendency to wear booty shorts and a fucking Richard Simmons headband on stage, it was abundantly clear to all that Robbo embodied everything about prog rock that makes me want to punch Rush fans in the fucking teeth. So Brian Robertson ran off to host an endless procession of one-man pretentiousness parties with himself as the guest of honor, and Lemmy held auditions for replacement guitarists and drummers. As Filthy Animal Taylor, being the one who brought him into the band to begin with, elected to split out of solidarity, presumably to start new musical projects that absolutely went nowhere at the speed of thought. On the guitar front, Lemmy was torn between a shredder named Phil Wizzo Campbell from an abysmal new wave of British heavy metal band named Persian Risk, and a bluesier, more raunchy, scarecrow-looking guitarist named Wurzel, whose only major prior credit included an appearance on the borderline punk NWOBHM band Warfare's second album, Metal Anarchy. The solution? Take them fucking both! With a percussive void promptly filled by Saxon luminary Pete Gill, the lineup for Motörhead Mark III had finally congealed. If I'm being perfectly honest, Orgasmatron ranks as my absolute least favorite Motörhead album. It's slapdash, only occasionally catchy, and upon further review, likely the single most gratingly overproduced record in the otherwise superb Motörhead discography. Like, what in the bewildering fuck is Lemmy doing with as much goddamn reverb on his voice?
To the door, here I go again. I seen it all before, happens now and then.
The motherfucker sounds like he's at the bottom of a well. What the fuck, Lemmy? Was there an underage groupie down there? You call Lemmy singing into a fucking foghorn to return to the raw, punk-laden, peerlessly minimalistic Motörhead roots? Fuck that noise and fuck this noise. With that said, it's still a Motörhead album, and therefore still superior to anything Metallica has ever recorded, aside from Motörhead covers, with my personal favorite being the kick flush to the cock known as Built for Speed.
I don't give a good goddamn. My life's been alright. I'm going crazy out of my mind every single night. I was born to rock and roll.
Orgasmatron. Not unlistenable, after all, there's a fucking Motörhead logo on it, but for indulging in proggishness without a maestro the caliber of Brian Robertson, this album ranks as quite possibly the single most overrated metal album of the 1980s, which, considering the leaning tower of overrated Guns N' Roses' Appetite for Destruction was released just a year later, is saying fucking plenty. You're A1 fucking right I went there. Next!
It says on me hat.
You've just had one of these.
Here's another one.
Do you know you're the first one what's ever smoked on MTV? It's not a very good advertisement for all these fans of yours what don't smoke.
I'm still alive and 42 years old. I'm a good advert for smoking.
I got rock and roll. It satisfies my soul. That's how it has to be. I won't get mad. I got rock and roll.
87's rock and roll is every bit as underrated as Orgasmatron was overrated, a bitchin' barrage of blues metal that reasserted the more aggressive side of Motörhead after two-fisted forays into borderline prog metal ponciness. I have never seen an album bashed more vociferously on a more consistent basis that deserved it any less than this record right the fuck here. Mind you, I'm not fitting Lemmy for a fucking halo here. He certainly didn't help his case by making the lead single the title track to the British comedy film Eat the Rich not just the weakest track on the album, but a shoo-in for the shittiest Motörhead song of the 80s easily. But with mercifully few exceptions, every solitary track apart from it positively dominates. The title track, Stone Deaf in the USA, and even The Wolf, a merciless speed metal mastodon preceded by an ingenious monologue from Monty Python legend Michael Palin. But my personal favorite and surefire shoo-in for the short list of my all-time favorite Motörhead tunes, period, is the darksome thunder of the criminally obscure Black Heart.
I can be sorry if I ain't always a saint. Like to be a nice guy, but don't blame me if I ain't. Black Heart, what you think of me? Black Heart, what you wanna believe? Dark side.
If I have one persistent critique, it's that two of the best songs recorded for the album were left the fuck off for some reason, only to find their way on to the B-sides of the vastly inferior Eat the Rich single. Those being the extended middle finger to the Grim Reaper that is Cradle to the Grave, and the finest groove-laden blues rock since Limb from Limb, a protest song actually, known as Just 'Cause You Got the Power. You put those two songs back on the album and rock and roll stands toe-to-toe with absolutely anything in the Motörhead arsenal, as it is is, this ranks as a personal highlight in the protracted musical highlight reel that is this band's discography in general. Listen to it, or fuck yourself.
You know, everywhere we've ever played, I'm sure, it's the same with a lot of other bands. No, everywhere. Everywhere in the whole world. You know, it's like they want, oh no, don't use the carpet, don't make a mess on the floor. And there's never any fucking ashtrays. So fuck them.
The dawn of the 1990s, as has been more than sufficiently documented by every VH1 Behind the Bullshit installment, kicked off with the commercial equivalent of a head-on collision for heavy metal. While I've documented a number of ways in which the metal genre, or at least particular subgenres like black metal, actually managed to survive and even thrive throughout the 90s, as a commercial force, if your name wasn't Metallica, Ozzy, or Pantera, you couldn't sell tuna to a starving cat, let alone a record to the paying public. Faced with dire decisions, metal at large seemed to split into two camps. Those who had gone grunge, and those who had gone the fuck away. Motörhead, they made their own fucking camp. A camp where, while other bands were leaping from the stern of the Lusitania, they were getting darker and heavier and honing their craft to peerless perfection, determined to rise above the adversity, secure their musical convictions, or go down with the motherfucking ship with middle fingers fully erect. I will say this from now until eternity, no heavy metal band weathered the protraction of cynically commercialized pretentiousness that was the 90s quite as well as Motörhead. And consequently, by the time the decade had drawn to a close, they had recorded easily the strongest work of their ever-loving lives, and 1916 was its spearhead, an album that refined the blues of the rock and roll album, while simultaneously incorporating some of the most daring sonic experimentation Lemmy and the boys had undertaken to that point, as characterized in earnest by the borderline symphonic title track. 1916, while not one of my personal favorites, nevertheless catalyzed Motörhead's 90s renaissance, and more to the point, it's regarded as a classic for a goddamn reason. Those who walk on the prog side, 1916 is the album for you.
I have a problem with my ex-boyfriend. I have a problem with mine, actually. He never calls, he never writes. I just got out of a mental hospital. Oh, good. Well, at least you got out. While I was in there, I broke up with him. He was in there too. And we both have a lot of problems. Everyone thinks he's psychotic, but I know different. I see. We live in different states. That's probably very good for both of you. He hasn't been writing or anything anymore. Yet when I call him, he says he still loves me. I love Rusty so much, and I just can't let go of him. It's breaking my heart. Should I give him another chance? In Misery, Nebraska. Well, I can understand why you're in misery if you're in Nebraska. The deal is this. If he is a psychopath, he'll kill you. You know? That's what psychopaths do best.
Alright, let's establish one fact right the fuck here and now. Motörhead has no bad albums. There is no more consistently exceptional heavy metal band since the genre's inception. That said, every band, no matter how blindingly dependable, has a red-headed stepchild in their discography. For Motörhead, that stepchild's given name is March or Die. With yet another major personnel change in the offing, it's kind of understandable why that might be the case, too, as longtime massively influential drummer Phil Filthy Animal Taylor stole Lemmy's girlfriend and promptly exited the band.
Well, basically, when he left and went and pinched my bird, and he was quite happy.
I did not pinch your bird.
I knew that.
She came round and fucking grabbed me.
I know. Mind you, I was better off in the end. You know she's moved back to LA, don't you?
Who?
Me.
Oh
no.
Well, I mean, I
she was looking for your number and I wouldn't give it. Aren't I a good guy?
Yes, thank you very much.
His replacement emerged in the form of my single favorite drummer on this fucking planet. Swedish former King Diamond and Dokken percussionist Mickey fucking D. Perhaps best known to the metal world at large for his starring role in a barroom brawl he once engaged in with an appropriately inebriated Yngwie Malmsteen. While it's easy to dismiss the record out of hand and assume the ginger-haired descriptor means the record isn't worth listening to, I think the most cogent description of the album comes when you actually compare it to the album that preceded it, 1916. Because while the bad songs on March or Die, like the listless title track, the toothless Asylum Choir, or the mindless monster ballad I Ain't No Nice Guy, are considerably worse than the worst songs on 1916, I think it's also true that the highlights on 1916 positively pale in comparison to those on March or Die, with my personal favorite being the papal-pounding anthem that flat-out curb-checks any song ever written by the punk band of the same name. Oh, you know I'm talking about Bad Religion.
I spit in the eye of Satan, spit right in your eye too. You are the spooks you're chasing, you know not what you do. Bad religion.
But not to worry, Rageaholics, Lemmy doesn't hate God, because God can't be self-loathing. March or Die, the weakest of the bunch? Fucking sure. But when the discography as a whole is choking down roids like Barry Bonds on any given weekday, can you really hold that against it? Having taken one flush to the handlebar mustache, the only extant questions seem to be how pissed will Motörhead be when they finally scrape themselves off the mat? And almost before they could even complete the thought, Lemmy was back on his feet, and he was pissed. With Filthy Animal Taylor in the rearview mirror resting comfortably on a box filled to overflowing with unsold copies of the weakest album of their motherfucking career, coupled with an early 90s musical market that had found newer, more flannel-bedecked and musically incompetent idols upon whose altar to worship, it's safe to say that when Lemmy, Wurzel, Phil Campbell, and Mickey D took to the studio to record the follow-up, the long ascent to the reclamation of their evaporating relevance would be steep indeed, but somehow, just a year later, they had planted their flags at what would come to be regarded as the pinnacle of early 90s Motörhead, hot on the heels of easily the most disappointing effort of their career, with songwriting punchier than Yngwie after a box of wine coolers, production fuller than Lemmy's mustache, and newly acquired drummer Mickey D, who had been relegated to just one song on the previous album, finally given free rein to unleash his unparalleled percussive prowess. Bastards is the sound of Motörhead operating at peak performance. This album is a sonic grab bag, with each seemingly disparate ingredient positively mastered. Want the catchy shit? Born to Raise Hell. Want the ballads? Lost in the Ozone. Speed metal? Consult my personal favorite track, the Pyromaniac Symphony, known as Burner. After 4 albums featuring a band frantically looking for a new sound, Bastards is what it sounds like when they finally fucking locate it. Just stay away from that fucking iced tea variant of Born to Raise Hell. All in all, I am physically incapable of recommending it highly enough. But the pinnacle of the pinnacle was yet to come.
How can you not see the stars in your eyes? How can you not see the stars in your eyes? Sacrifice, sacrifice.
After fruitful experimentation with punk rock and prog, not to mention the band's pioneering role in the formation of the fledgling speed and thrash metal genres earlier in the 80s, by halfway through the subsequent decade, 2 things were abundantly clear. Other bands had ripped Motörhead off, and other bands were making a shitload more money doing it. Whether it was Metallica suddenly being fronted by a handlebar mustache-bedecked James Hetfield doing a shitty reverse Lemmy impersonation with a mic stand an inch from the fucking floor, or Suicidal Tendencies' entire goddamn career, Lemmy took a long look at what had become of metal in the 90s and said, hey, hold the fuck up, we did that first and we can do it a fuck of a lot better. And out popped Sacrifice. If you're asking for my sincere opinion, there is no better metal album recorded in the entirety of the 1990s, and quite possibly no better thrash album ever recorded, fucking period. Sacrifice is a metallic thermonuclear warhead, leveling all skepticism in a 17-mile radius. Not one weak track on the ever-loving record, unceasing salvos of sonic savagery crafted for a singular purpose: to attack. Except without the shitty crab walk and lack of talent. Best track, one fellow Rageaholics may be familiar with from when it was featured in my review of Dragon Age Origins, In Another Time.
The glass seems to sing, but the words are like death. They can be anything. Here we are, win or draw, badly used, badly scored. Got away.
But go the fuck ahead, skip around. Not 5 adjacent seconds of any track on this album can be remotely construed as subpar, but like all diamonds, it didn't come into being without a fair amount of pressure. Pressure that saw longtime guitarist Wörld, whose more bluesy playing style conflicted with Sacrifice's more aggressive, thrash-oriented direction, part ways with the band, sadly never to return.
He started accusing me of stealing his money and shit, you know. I mean, I need Wörld's money, you know. I mean, I got all that money coming from Auckland before, and the Motörhead before him, you know. I didn't need his fucking money, you know. And I wouldn't have stolen it even if I did, you know. It's not like me. But you know, there you go. You make your choices, suffer the consequences, you know.
It took him like 6 hours to try and do a solo with this one song on Sacrifice. In the end, he just fucking slammed the guitar down and legged it. Took the guitar with him. And that was basically it.
For the first time in 12 years, Motörhead were a three-piece once again, and thus the lineup that has subsisted and thrived well into the present day was born. Long live Phil Campbell, Mickey D, and Lemmy Kilmister. For my money, the true classic lineup of Motörhead. Masterpiece though it is, Sacrifice is also the dictionary definition of an album that was ignored by the public entirely simply because it was metal and it was the 90s. In the face of adversity, Sacrifice has since emerged as an unfairly overlooked masterpiece in a discography that few people rarely venture outside of. Ace of Spades. You fucking owe it to yourself to remedy that, because since 1995, Mark IV Motörhead have been the single most consistent metal band in existence, and Sacrifice was only the beginning.
Outside your window, Civil War, Civil War. All your yesterdays gone before. Civil War.
But no one's perfect, and it didn't take but one more record for the newly formed three-piece to illustrate that they were every bit as carbon-based and therefore fallible as everyone the fuck else. Don't mistake what I'm saying here. 1996's follow-up, Overnight Sensation, isn't trash. Far the fuck from it, but after their unrelenting assault of Sacrifice, not to mention the utterly superb Bastards, the somewhat more subdued, multifarious, and slightly more commercial approach taken on Overnight Sensation did feel like a trek back through familiar territory. Namely, territory the band had already thoroughly explored on March or Die in 1916. Compared to those albums, Overnight Sensation's a motherfucking beast, particularly its faster, heavier moments like the whiplash-inducing Them Not Me. But between the infamous disappearance of Lemmy's trademark mutton stash and the step away from the rhythmically driven sonic siege of Sacrifice, something about this album just doesn't click. In subsequent interviews, guitarist Phil Campbell has admitted that after working his ever-loving ass off on Sacrifice, not to mention on the subsequent tour with Slayer, he felt more than a little burned out when it came time to write Overnight Sensation, and in retrospect it certainly fucking sounds that way. A bad follow-up, but a great fucking album.
We're here at the Continental for the Motörhead Tribute Night. Alright, so do you think they have done like justice to your songs up there?
They're doing their best.
I love him. What a fucking diplomat, man.
As the 90s drew to a close, Motörhead had run a musical triathlon, beginning the decade experimenting with pop and prog while simultaneously reconnecting to their blues roots, collaborating with Ice-T for some full-on rap metal, and putting Metallica, Slayer, and Anthrax to shame with a superior version of their own unique brand of thrash. They'd done it all and done it well, but they also seemed somewhat aimless. Snakebite Love is a product of that meandering creative direction. Not bad, because again, Motörhead doesn't make bad albums, but every bit as disjointed as the album that preceded it, although in my opinion still an eminently worthwhile release. I mean, just pop the damn disc in and play, would you? Following up catchy album openers like Love for Sale with outright sacrifice-esque thrash in Dogs of War, and going for the trifecta with some pseudo-50s rock and roll bullshit in the form of the title track? I mean, for a band so frequently accused of resting on their musical laurels and re-releasing the same album, no two records during the 90s sounded anything the fuck alike, and on Snakebite Love, that's true from track to track. My personal highlight, however, came in the form of easily one of the most experimental songs of their career, the plodding, rhythmic showcase that is Assassin. Just more fodder for the proverbial shit pile of examples of Mickey D's boundless talents behind the drum kit.
I mean, I explain it like this. I can overplay these songs. Very, very simple, easy. I can do drums all over these songs and show how damn good I am, you know? With a million fucking things. But that's not Motorhead. I'll destroy this music. I never want to do that. I like to keep it really straight and heavy, and when the shit gets there, it's supposed to taste good. You have to choose your moments.
For some inexplicable reason, I've run into countless Motorhead fans who positively detest this album, but to me, it's not musically all that far removed from Sacrifice and a country-ass mile ahead of the disappointing Overnight sensation. Solid songwriting that, in my opinion, just needed a solid 15 extra minutes in the oven for that golden brown crust. Next! As the new millennium dawned, perennial patriarch Lemmy Kilmister was suddenly stopped near dead in his tracks as he was suddenly hospitalized, nearly comatose, with absolutely no clue whatsoever as to what was afflicting him. Upon recovering, he received the unfortunate news that he was officially a diabetic. Should have stayed away from those Michael Jackson ballads, buddy. Rocked by the news that his immortality was less than absolute, a chance phone call from a lifelong fan and world-famous professional wrestler Triple H helped set the Killmaster back on track. Whatever else can be said about the man, and internet smarks have certainly offered their fair share of less than flattering commentary on the subject, for helping to reinvigorate a living musical icon during a crossroads in his life, there's a special corner of Valhalla reserved for Triple fucking H. After more aggressive outings in the latter part of the decade, Motorhead returned to the more varied approach perfected on Bastards, and fuck if I know how, but they managed to goddamn top themselves with We Are Motörhead. That they managed to do so during one of the darkest periods of the band's history makes the album all the more impressive. We Are Motörhead is an absolutely masterful album, equal parts catchy, aggressive, and irreverent, and the album that may well feature some of the single fastest, most aggressive compositions the band has ever laid the fuck down.
What's the matter, baby? What a wicked smile. You look like the ghost of Cinderella.
Reasserting their dominance with anthemic fare like One More Fucking Time, speed metal masterworks like the title track and See Me Burning, and even reconnecting with their latent punk rock roots with a cocksure cover of the Sex Pistols classic God Save the Queen. If you need one album that perfectly encapsulates all that Mark IV Motorhead stands for, that album's name, rather appropriately, is We Are Motörhead. Buy it, nerd!
May come off momentarily.
We are Motörhead.
Undertaker and King.
We're gonna kick your ass.
Ready to get it on.
Time to play the game. Time to play the game.
An album title I can only assume was meant to subliminally convey the mindset under which it was fucking conceived. Despite Motorhead's triumphant introduction to a ravenous young new audience at one of the most successful WrestleMania pay-per-views in history, the album the band would follow up with was far from their ideal introduction to the monolith that is Motörhead. Depending on which version of this album you happen to own, this is 11 tracks of filler and 2 songs so good it's a mortal sin to include them in this humdrum hodgepodge. I know Lemmy was probably still reeling from health issues, and the band had only just emerged from the commercial mire of the 1990s, but god damn it, you are better than this and you know it. Granted, later editions of the album include the stellar Triple H entrance theme song, The Game, a favor Triple H returned by providing guest vocals on the spoken word experiment known as Serial Killer. But sift through all the wreckage and what you're left with, good ideas aside, is an album that took twice as long and sounds half as good. Whether it's worse than the disappointing March or Die is simply a matter of taste, but being mentioned in that company cannot possibly be construed as fucking good. Hammered is about as weak as Motörhead gets, which is to say, still eminently listenable. With Lemmy and the men of the band's first bona fide dog in a decade adorning the rearview mirror, the Motörhead faithful were on the lookout for the definitive comeback. An album that lived up to the legacy established by We Are Motörhead, and perhaps got even heavier. As the calendar rolled on over to 2004, no one was fully prepared for what happened next.
You might as well die doing this. It's an honourable death. You know, I can't see. I mean, if I become so infirm I can't play, that's the only thing that will stop me. You know, I'm not volunteering for retirement. I've seen it. It's boring. I have no grandchildren to bounce on my knee. You know, that's. I'm certainly not going to start bouncing other people's grandchildren on my knee, because look at Michael Jackson. So.
Scorching comeback, a thrash-laden metalliferous monstrosity, and without exaggeration, one of the single greatest heavy metal albums of the 21st century. When Motörhead traded up with new producer Cameron Webb and ignited the Inferno just prior to their 30th anniversary, it didn't exceed expectations, it motherfucking demolished them. Musically something of a companion piece to 1995's superb Sacrifice album, but with a more musically diverse blues-infused undercurrent that puts the album a cut above its thrash and speed metal roots. Phil Campbell's guitar playing has never been more loose or vicious. Lemmy's voice and galloping rhythmic bass have never been quite so bellicose, and drummer Mickey D may well never have recorded any better drum performance in his entire storied career. Lemmy explores longtime lyrical themes like the horrors of war, the inevitability of aging and death, and the collapse of the ecosystem, crafting some of the finest poetic vulgarity to date. From the ignition of the relentless album opener, Terminal Show, to the laid-back cowboy crooning of the uncharacteristically melodic but utterly convincing closing track Whorehouse Blues, Inferno is the sound of Motörhead with all pistons firing, but no song fires off louder than the ruthless rampage on my favorite cut, the aptly titled Fight.
Fighting like a beast, you must stand and fight. 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 Fight.
I lack the superlatives to recommend this album with sufficient aplomb. Suffice to say, this album is spectacular, and proof positive that those who daren't venture outside of the classic threesome of Overkill, Bomber, and Ace of Spades can never call themselves a true Motörhead or even metal fan, and serves as the beginning of what would come to be known as Motörhead's New Millennium Trilogy. Chuck this shit into the stereo, tear the volume knob off, and hold on for dear fucking life, because Inferno is an album for the goddamn ages. Much like the middle chapter of the first classic Motörhead trilogy, the excellent '79 classic Bomber, Kiss of Death is just another bafflingly good record that had the misfortune of finding itself sandwiched between two other bafflingly good records. Living up to a classic is never an easy task, but while 2006's Inferno follow-up Kiss of Death isn't necessarily superior to the album that preceded it, it's absolutely in the same goddamn weight class. If Inferno only flirted with a lyrical theme of war, from its artillery-laden album sleeve to songs like God Was Never on Your Side, Sucker, Sword of Glory, and Kingdom of the Worm, Kiss of Death is a borderline wartime concept album exploring the violence, bravery, and futility of war in unflinching detail. Kiss of Death marries the thrash metal trappings of Inferno with the more classic rock character of earlier efforts and finds its own comfortable niche as a result. Do not make the mistake of overlooking the Kiss of Death. While Kiss of Death was indeed a beast, I'd be lying if I said I wasn't at least a smidge disappointed with it as a follow-up to Inferno. I remember vividly popping into the record store on day one to buy it, heading on over to work, throwing it on the PA, and about halfway through the album just sort of thinking, this is it? After the musical fucking kaiju monster that was Inferno, this is the sequel? It was a little too rock for my liking and a couple instances of filler. Great album, and certainly one I've come to appreciate with the passage of time, but just not what I was looking for at that precise moment. Roll that sundial on over to 2008, however, and the script was flipped right the fuck over. Motörizer had all the energy, drive, and Ebola fucking catchy songwriting I initially felt was lacking in the trilogy's middle chapter. But the album's finest hour comes with a sophomore track, Lemmy's collective admonishment of every single virginal internet troll to ever sign up for a sock puppet account on Twitter or YouTube while giving hot bitches the stink eye in a cyber cafe for the crime of not being sexually interested in them. Teach you how to sing the blues.
Or are we pushing too hard? If you wanna get your hands on a beautiful girl, you gotta use a MasterCard. There's no excuse for bullshit, so don't try to beat me none.
Now you know troll is actually the sound blithering 4chanites make as they mange on Lemmy's chode. Motörizer, the cherry on top of the new trilogy. Listen to it, bitch. You were doing so well. Sorry guys, but I just don't fucking dig 2010's The World Is Yours. Are there some solid tracks? Has Lemmy tasted booze? It's a fucking Motörhead record. That doesn't excuse down-paced droning dog shit like I Know How to Die, where Phil Campbell slinks listlessly back to the same chord progression like he's in an abusive relationship with the fucking thing. Nor does it extend pardon to the borderline self-plagiarism that is Outlaw.
Live or die, stand or run, shoot 'em down, smoking gun. Stand or fall, live or die, stand strong and true till the end. Now, live and night, stand in stone, skull and bone, dead witness to an unseen fight.
Whether it's down to Lemmy's looming health crisis or just plain burnout after 3 straight albums of peerless perfection, The World Is Yours is just a little off. The guitar riffs vacillate from mind-blowing to narcoleptic. Lemmy's voice is buried beneath 20 layers of the shittiest shredder from Ninja Turtles vocal effects the poor bastard's throat has been subjected to yet. And Mickey D? The man's perfect. What do you want from me? I'm pretty sure the flawless bastard shits chocolate truffles. One time he got trichinosis and Swedish schoolchildren followed him down the street with Halloween bags for a goddamn month. I don't know where I'm going with this. This album ain't bad, but it's Motörhead bad. Hey, no one bats 1,000. Next! If there's one recurring theme throughout what will next year be a 40-year career, it's that where Motörhead is concerned, adversity breeds tenacity and invariably leads to their strongest work. And such is decidedly the fucking case with last year's mortar salvo, known as Aftershock. After canceling an entire leg of their 2010 tour with Megadeth due to Lemmy's ongoing vocal issues, shortly after which doctors carved the man's chest cavity open and attached a robot to his ticker, many touring bands at their age would have called it a fucking career, but you mark my goddamn words, this man will die on stage, and it'll be easily the single most metal moment since the inception of the goddamn universe. But a surefire contender for second most metal moment is named fucking Aftershock, Motorhead's finest record since Inferno, and my uncontested standout for best of 2013. I have literally no clue how they fucking do it. I mean, sure, over the course of this video, I've enjoyed some albums more than others, but show me a bad album by this band, and I will show you a bold-faced fucking liar. 4 decades into their lifespan, the Kaisers of consistency are still generating relevant, brutal, but still quintessentially Motorhead releases, while leaving ample room to try new genres on for size, as evidenced by Aftershock's forays into everything from AC/DC-style 70s rock a la Keep Your Powder Dry, to an even more in-depth exploration of down-home country blues than the one featured on Inferno, a track aptly titled Lost Woman Blues.
Woke up this morning, all my life was broken down.
Over 20 albums into their utterly unmatched marathon career, Motorhead prove all the pitchfork hipsters wrong and continue to stretch themselves musically and lyrically, and do it with 10 times the conviction, style, or motherfucking nuts of anyone else on the goddamn horizon. Long live Motorhead, and long live Aftershock!
This segment is now over. I'm sure you're all pleased to hear that. If you line up in the foyer later, we'll try and get you all a glass of Kiora and possibly a sweet or two, all right? But don't bank on it, because we're fucking mean around here.
We know welcome, we bring you rock and roll. We are the ones you love with ones you hate. We are the ones who wait too early or too late. We are the first and we just still might be the last. We are Motorhead, come to kick your ass.
You never have like a girl like come up on stage like with a guitar and like, I don't know, like show her boobs and put it in rape you or something?
While I was playing, right?
Really?
Yeah.
On stage? That's pretty impressive.
I thought it was pretty
What was
impressive.
this? That is
I was
pretty
impressed, believe me.